This is the Khmer Times News. My name is Paolo Bornini, and these are your headlines. Myanmar's leader is not welcome at the ASEAN Forum. Dengue fever is at a record high. And according to many, the end of the world is only days away. But first, more from our main story. The poorest country in Southeast Asia is Myanmar. Their GDP per capita is a full 25% lower than Cambodia, a country that is still fighting its way out of total economic collapse. And things for Myanmar are not getting any better, as yet again they have been excluded from the ASEAN forums. For the second consecutive year, Myanmar's military junta leader has been excluded from the upcoming ASEAN summit. The ASEAN chair is Cambodia, and they defended its decision not to invite him because there has been no visible progress by the junta to implement peace initiatives put forward by the bloc following last year's coup. ASEAN is extremely anxious over the junta's apparent slow response to take steps to peacefully end the armed conflict within Myanmar. Also, the military government has done little to implement the bloc's 5-point consensus, agreed by all members of the ASEAN, and even by the dictator of Myanmar himself. But now he has chosen not to follow promises with action, and yet again chooses violent conflict over peaceful resolution. Human rights group AAPP has confirmed that 2,500 civilian deaths have been recorded, and over 15,000 people have been detained by the regime. But the real tipping point for the ASEAN is when the brutal dictatorship executed 4 opposition activists who were convicted by a sham court and then simply murdered. Many are saying Myanmar should quite simply be kicked out of the ASEAN altogether, as their leaders' hands are soaked with the blood of their innocent victims. Crime stories are popular news stories. Audiences like them. But in Cambodia, there is really not that much crime. That is, unless you look at Sihanoukville, which taints the country's peaceful, law-abiding reputation with continued murders, tons of drugs, and now its thirst for human trafficking. But the Cambodian government is losing its patience. Before we lead into this story, allow me to play you a clip I ran a couple of months ago, because nothing describes these horrendous crimes more than seeing it for yourselves. This first boy looks just 16 years of age, and he, like all the others, is kicked and beaten violently. They live in a world of complete and total fear, often handcuffed whilst they are beaten. It is of unspeakable cruelty that these gangs are allowed to get away with this, and this level of depravity continues on and on and on. But let's take a closer look. This is that young lad. He can be no more than 16. And in this still frame, we can clearly see he has been handcuffed. Allow me to slow this clip down. What you see is the young boy being tortured like so many. See these sparks appearing on the screen now? Well, that is electricity. They are being hit by cattle prods. This man is tied to a bedpost. It is quite simply absurd that this kind of treatment is reported again and again and again, and it still continues. Casino operators in Pria Sihanouk province have been described as being uncooperative and ungovernable by outright refusing to obey the rules and regulations of the local administration. Some casinos are even hiding their ownership and contact details, making it very difficult to determine who is actually in charge. The level of violence and of crime reported is often staggering, and the administration now hopes to change all this in a bid to clean up its image as a hotspot for human trafficking. The governor issued a notice saying, "Casino owners are no longer allowed to keep the passports or working permits of any of their staff, and they are no longer allowed to hide their location or operations with high fences." He added, "If you do not follow any of the rules and regulations, you will be closed down." But it is action and not rules that changes the behavior of criminals. So we will see over the next few months what changes do occur. The killer that stalks the land is dengue fever. It infects up to 400 million people globally per year, and approximately 100 million people get seriously ill from the infection, and tens of thousands die. The death is slow and often painful, and unfortunately this year, Cambodia is recording record levels of the infection. Cambodia recorded nearly 8,000 dengue fever cases in the first 9 months of this year, a threefold jump compared to the same period of last year. The National Control Programme for Dengue said this week, and the mosquito-borne disease is killing mostly children, aged between 2 months and 2 years old. And there are two main contributory factors for the death toll rising. First, the early rainy season has increased cases, and people aren't so worried about dengue due to COVID. Heavy rains have brought more mosquitoes, but the problem is compounded by the parents. Many of those with sick children have admitted to being negligent in taking their children to a hospital or a clinic, preferring to try and treat the cases themselves. A health ministry spokesman has warned parents not to try to treat the disease themselves or to seek treatment from an unauthorized medical practitioner. Kompong Savai, Health Department Director, said that over 1,000 cases have been recorded and 3 deaths in their province alone. He said all 3 deaths involved children whose parents had admitted that they delayed in seeking proper medical intervention. And that is where the tragedy lies. Let us now have some good news, and it comes from the business sector. 150 projects worth $3.5 billion have been approved in just the last 9 months. This is truly an impressive figure, and one that will bring employment to many. Cambodia has approved 150 fixed asset investment projects worth a staggering $3.45 billion, according to the Council for the Development of Cambodia. Lim Heng, the vice president of the Cambodian Chamber of Commerce, attributed the growth in investment to the efficient control of the pandemic crisis. He said, "The successful management of COVID-19 pandemic has led to the resumption of all business, and this has built confidence with investors." And at current, the main investment does come from China, but the biggest consumer for the kingdom still remains the United States. The self-styled prophet of doom, Kiem Vesna, this week apologized to his followers for getting the date of the end of the world wrong. But don't think he has given up, because this time he says he has definitely got it right, and the end of the world is an awful lot sooner than you may think. The prophet has apologized to Cambodian migrant workers who had left their jobs in Japan and South Korea to join his doomsday gathering. They had taken their most valued possessions and their families and travelled to the prophet's farm in Siem Reap. But his August 30th prediction came and went. Now, just to refresh your memory, this man predicted a flood of biblical proportions, and it would end the world. Unbelievably, hundreds of migrant workers from as far away as South Korea flocked to his farm, which fortunately was the only place on earth that is not to be flooded. Now, it is located in the Kulen Mountains, which is really not much in the way of a mountain. Think more mildly impressive hill, and you'll have the correct image. The prophet of doom said the devastation of the earth will occur this weekend. And to his followers, he said, I was wrong only about when the devastating flood will occur, and I apologize for giving the wrong dates. However, I am sure the end of the world will take place. He then added, in a classic cult bait and switch style, I want to reiterate to all my followers that I do not compel them to stay. They are free to go whenever they like. However, and here is the cult bit, I am not to blame if any of you dies in the flood. So, this weekend, the end of the world, and we didn't even carry it as our top story. And now it's time to look at our sports news. In the T20 cricket this week, the Australians were beaten by England in a thrilling close as wicket after wicket fell in the final overs. And England were handed the win. New Zealand beat Pakistan and India beat South Africa by 7 wickets. But now it is to the Premier League that we turn. All here pretty much as you would expect. Chelsea beat Wolves 3-0. Arsenal, a close game, 3-2 against Liverpool at Highbury. The biggest result, I suppose, really, is Crystal Palace 2-1 against Leeds. They needed those points to lift them up the table, and it's to the top of the table we go now. And there they are, off that Liverpool win, Arsenal on top, but only by a single point. Man City just won't slip. They're like the Terminator. They just keep on going. Chelsea sitting at 4th, Man U directly behind them. And to prop up the top 10, we have Liverpool on just 10 points. It's time to have a look ahead and see what the weather has in store for us next week. Well, look at this. It's rather nice, isn't it? For once, we don't have a legion of clouds and rain and thunder marching towards us. Over the weekend, it looks like it's going to be rather mild. And as we progress into the week, it's only going to get better. This has been the Khmer Times News. You can contact myself at the studio by mailing us at ktnewsstudio@gmail.com. Please do subscribe and comment and stay up to date with all the breaking news by following us on both Facebook and Telegram. This has been Paolo Bonini, and that was the week that was. I'll see you next weekend for your weekly roundup.